The galaxy had always operated on a balance of power. The most fearsome species were known across systems, their reputations preceding them wherever they went. The Exurix, for example, were a technologically advanced species capable of manipulating energy with the precision of a master sculptor. Their hyper-efficient war machines could devastate entire planets, their lasers cutting through armor and shields with terrifying ease. The Vino, while not as advanced, were known for their cunning and their ability to sway other species with their charisma, manipulating situations and alliances to their advantage. The Ngara, as previously mentioned, were brutal warriors whose strength and ferocity in battle had earned them the title of the galaxy's ultimate predators. For millennia, these races had danced the fine line of diplomacy and warfare, testing one another in small-scale battles, political maneuvering, and espionage. While the galaxy had always been in a state of uneasy peace, there was no real fear of total collapse. Everyone understood their place within the great machine of the universe, their roles carved out by years of history and tradition. But then, humanity came to the galaxy, and everything began to shift. Lieutenant John Carter was not some general commanding vast fleets, or some diplomat with a network of influential allies. He was a soldier, a product of Earth's violent past and its relentless determination to thrive. Born on a world of war, Carter had grown up amidst violence, loss, and the raw, brutal realities of life on a death world. Humans were a species forged in the furnace of conflict. Theirs was a history not of peace or quiet diplomacy, but of wars won against impossible odds. They were survivors, capable of enduring the worst the universe could throw at them and then rising again, scarred but unbroken. It was no wonder then that the Nicer's crew was so confused about Carter's role on board. He wasn't an envoy. He wasn't a specialist. He was simply a human soldier who, by some strange twist of fate, had found himself on a peacekeeping mission alongside the most advanced species in the galaxy. It was almost laughable in the beginning. The human soldiers who had accompanied the diplomats were no different from the Ngarai in their appearance. Tough, hard, their bodies honed by combat. But none of the other factions thought much of them. They were outnumbered, outclassed in terms of technology, and, in many minds, inconsequential. But it wasn't long before the humans began to show their true strength. At first, it was subtle. The way they navigated tense diplomatic moments, never flinching in the face of alien glares or condescension. Their quiet confidence, their unwavering stance when faced with the most aggressive of negotiations. The Nicer's captain, a veteran of hundreds of missions across the galaxy, had begun to notice something in Carter's behavior. He wasn't afraid. Not in the way most would be. Certainly not in the way any of the other diplomats had been, even when threatened. Carter simply held his ground. And then came the incident, the event that would prove to the galaxy that humans were not simply another race to be dealt with, not just another species in the vast expanse of stars. Humans were a force. It started, as many things did, with a misunderstanding. The Ngara, as they always did, had arrived with a sense of superiority. Their emissaries had walked into the peace conference room, their armor gleaming with pride, their presence commanding and filled with threat. For the Ngara, peace talks were always a formality. They had never been interested in compromise, only in subjugation. Their brutal form of diplomacy was simple: agree to their terms or face their might. Every race knew this. And now, the humans would see it firsthand. Gartok, their leader, was the living embodiment of this philosophy. A warlord whose very name struck terror in the hearts of the galaxy's weaker species. He carried the weight of his people's bloodthirsty history with pride. His mere presence in the room sent waves of unease through the human diplomats. Yet, Carter remained calm. He studied Gartok as the warlord spoke, his voice deep, commanding, as he announced the Ngara's terms. The human diplomats tried to respond in kind, their words polite but firm, emphasizing the need for cooperation, for peace. But it became clear very quickly that the Ngara had no interest in negotiation. Gartok's patience wore thin, and he did something that none of the other delegates had expected. He reached across the table, grabbing the human diplomat closest to him by the collar and lifting him off the ground with ease. The diplomat gasped, his feet kicking at the air as the warlord held him by the throat. Silence fell. The other diplomats froze. No one knew what to do. The Ngara had always been unpredictable in battle, but this was something else. They had just assaulted one of the humans in full view of the entire room. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the room would descend into chaos. The human diplomats were reaching for weapons, the other factions were preparing for a response, and the Ngara soldiers at Gartok's back shifted their stance, eyes narrowed and ready to fight. But amidst all the tension, there was a stillness, a presence that cut through the room like a blade. Lieutenant John Carter stood up from his seat, his eyes locked on Gartok with a kind of cold, unflinching determination. It wasn't the kind of defiance one might expect from a human facing a warlord. No. This was something far deeper. Carter wasn't challenging Gartok in the way others might have. He wasn't trying to prove his strength or force an altercation. He was simply existing. His presence, his aura, his very being emanated a message. He would not be intimidated. Not by Gartok, not by any of the galaxy's monsters. "Let him go," Carter said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. Gartok sneered, his eyes flaring with the arrogance of one who had never been challenged. He held the human diplomat aloft, seemingly preparing to make a statement of his own, but Carter's next words cut through the tension like a sharpened sword. "You've made a mistake," Carter said, his tone deadly serious. "And you will regret it." Then, in a blur of movement, Carter was upon Gartok. The Ngara warlord didn't have time to react before Carter drove his knee into the alien's midsection, a blow that struck with the force of an oncoming freight train. The impact sent Gartok staggering backward, gasping for air. The force of the strike reverberated throughout the room, sending a shockwave of disbelief through the assembled delegates. The Ngara was reeling, but Carter wasn't done. In a single, fluid motion, he grabbed Gartok by the throat and slammed him against the wall. The warlord's body crumpled as his back collided with the metal paneling. Carter's face was a mask of stoic intensity. The other delegates remained frozen, watching the scene unfold before them. "You don't get to do that," Carter growled, his voice like steel. It was clear that Carter wasn't just punishing Gartok for the attack. No, this was something else. He was teaching the entire room a lesson. Humans weren't just another species in the galaxy to be manipulated, coerced, or intimidated. They were different. They were lethal. And when pushed, they fought with everything they had. There was no honor code, no understanding of mercy. When humans fought, they fought to win, and nothing would stop them. Gartok, still gasping for air, tried to break free. His hands clawed at Carter's, but it was like fighting a rock, unmovable, unyielding. And in that moment, he realized something that would haunt him forever, no matter how strong he was, no matter how much power his species commanded. It meant nothing in the face of a human who refused to back down. The silence that followed was deafening. No one in the room dared to speak. Gartok was still struggling to regain his breath, his eyes wild with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and fear. But Carter's eyes never left him. "Remember this," Carter said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "Humans don't lose. We don't submit. We fight for what's ours, and we never stop. You might have been able to bully other species, but you just found out what happens when you try it with us." With a final shove, Carter released Gartok, sending the warlord crashing to the floor in a heap. The room was silent, no one daring to speak. And in that silence, the truth settled in. The galaxy had just learned that humans were a force unlike anything they had ever encountered. Word of the incident spread quickly. News networks across countless systems picked up the story, broadcasting the event to every corner of the galaxy. The story of the human diplomat and the Enangara warlord spread like wildfire, and with it, the realization that humanity was not to be trifled with. The Enangara, once thought invincible, had been humbled. Their once proud warlord had been taken down in a single decisive moment. And the galaxy, for the first time, truly understood what it meant to be human.